If you are feeling trapped financially, this episode is designed specifically for you. Today, my guest, Amanda Neely, joins me, and she is going to share a story that will make you maybe resonate with you and make you say, oh man, I get it. Because when she and her husband opened a coffee shop, they got knocked around quite a bit. And as successful as a coffee shop can be, there are lots of things that you have to learn as you are starting your own business and just going through the ranks of entrepreneurship. But because of those experiences, it opened her eyes to a whole new way of interacting with money. And she learned and now helps people unlock money for themselves. Stay around, listen to the full episode. And if you love it, I want you to make sure that you share it with somebody so that they can grow as well. And hey, while you're here, would you just scroll on down and make sure that you rate this 5 stars? And if you have a moment, it would just send me over the moon if you drop the actual review, which you can only do on iTunes at this time. So thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Hey guys, welcome back to Ask Me How I Know. I am so excited to have this amazing guest with me because you know what? One, you already know that I love all my guests. They're all amazing and they bring something special and unique to the table. But I love it when I have powerhouse women that I get to share space with. I love you men too. You guys are fantastic. But sometimes women are quiet and they just want to stay in the corners. And I love it when I have an ambitious woman that wants to come out and speak her truth and share how she can serve and help the world in a powerful way. And so today I have Amanda Neely with me, and she is doing amazing things. So Amanda, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Julie. It's so great to be here.
So Amanda, we had some off-camera conversation, as I always do with my guests, and one of my favorite parts of it. But you know, you were telling me your story, and I wanted to interrupt you 12 times, and I didn't because I wanted to be fresh and exciting as we had this discussion. But the fact that you owned a coffee shop with your husband, one, I can see you as a total coffee entrepreneur. That just makes sense to me. But tell us a little bit about that experience of owning a coffee shop and where it led you.
Yeah, I sometimes call it my personal MBA program. I learned so much about business and how one runs and all the inner workings, like your podcast thing description says about going like behind the scenes at a restaurant. Like I ran the back office, right? I knew what was going on behind the scenes. I had to learn. And it was really great, but I would never do it again. I feel like I learned what I needed to, because it was also just to be vulnerable and upfront. It was super challenging. There are so many times I wanted to give up and try, go back to cubicle land and live a safe existence. But I'm a way better person today because of what that whole journey and what I went through, both the pros and the cons.
What were some of those? And I agree with you. Tons of amens on this, because as we go through entrepreneurship, like there are all the pain points, and this is what separates everybody is, are you going to stick with it? How much do you really believe in this? Do you really believe in what you're doing enough to, have more skin on the game when you feel like quitting? So what were some of those near snapping points for you?
Yeah. So we started without any funds, right? We actually still had student debt when we were starting, and to get the capital we needed to get going, right? Like buying an espresso machine that's good, like quality, is $10,000, right?
Did everybody just hear that? 10 grand for the real high end. And that's actually probably like a decent one, because I've heard prices up in like the 20s and stuff. So when you pay your $5 for your cup of, for your latte, there is a reason why.
Exactly. Yep. And it cost like $250,000 to start a coffee shop, and we had zero to get going. And so there were many times along the way that it was like, we can't do this. We're never going to get the funds. And I remember one particular moment in particular, I was just ready to give up. My husband was still like working in cubicle land, and I was, kind of doing this on my own, trying to get it going so that he could leave too. And he came home from work, and I was just in tears. I could not go forward. And I told him, like, I'm going to go start applying for jobs. And we went out, we got a sandwich at a local place, right, to just have some dinner, and talk things through. And he talked me off the ledge that day. Um, and there's like all these different times when I would say to somebody, I'm done, I'm ready to go. And that person, as my friend, as my life partner, whoever it was, as a coach, would talk me off the ledge and help me remember the why behind what I was doing, and help me see, like, it's not impossible. People have done it before. You can figure out a way, right?
That's such a common concept right there. Is there's nothing unique to any of us. Somebody else has done it. And so if you really think that you can't do it, you look around. Somebody else has done it, or they're doing it, and that someone can be you. So, okay, I have a bunch of questions before we dive into even more of the topic that we want to discuss. But I just want to dig into this because there's a lot of mindset that I think you developed through this experience that helped you explode with what you're doing. And okay, so when we're looking at some of those things that almost made you snap, what was it? Finding employees? Was it dealing with getting goods and services? Like what was it that was like, I'm done with the health inspector, I'm done? Like what was it that you were actually just, what would fry you the most?
Yeah, it was most of the time money concerns. Like, where is the money going to come from to pay for this? Or realizing just how expensive things were, right? The first 2 years of the business, we lived on just tips. That's all that my husband and I took from the business. We were making sure we paid our rent on time, paying our staff, paying our vendors, like all those things. We never missed a beat, but we did that at our personal sacrifice. And that second year of business, we also had a whole bunch of just personal family things happen. My husband's grandma died. My mom had a stroke. Like, I ended up having a miscarriage that year, and our marriage almost broke. And we were like, not talking, right? Like not like, communication wasn't there, but also like physically we were separating from each other. And thankfully we had some community that said, we support you, we love you. And that helped turn us back to each other and find a way to make it work. And that was kind of the turning point where we decided we have to pay ourselves. We have to like be people outside of our business, not just be, entrepreneurs. We have to be Brandon and Amanda, right? Like, we can't, and so we started like a weekly date night, and that seems like not that big of a deal, but to have 2 to 3 hours that we got to leave the coffee shop early and go just do whatever we wanted, right? Like, and be ourselves. That was such a big difference in terms of then helping us see ourselves as this is more than just, we are more than just what we're doing, the whole, like, we're human beings too.
This is,
yeah.
Oh, go ahead. I don't want to stop you.
Go for it. Yeah.
This is such a common denominator for anyone who is in entrepreneurship in any capacity. And I'll even extend that out. If you are just simply an ambitious person, you start to come into these conflicts with your identity crisis, right? Of like, who am I? What am I really about? And it all just blends together. That's been one of my personal growth areas over the last year is, okay, well, if I schedule my appointments with people and I keep my appointments, I had the realization with my family of like, it's love. I'm showing you love by putting you on my schedule, because if I won't break these appointments with, people that I care about that are not my family, you should be on my calendar, and starting to create a different identity. But it's one of those growing pains. That's a lot to go through in a year for anybody at any given time. But starting a new business, I'm sorry, those are a whole bunch of, I'm sorry, all of those things happened, but they've led you to this new place, and they've really created the foundation for you to be successful. So tell us how that led you to where you are now.
Yeah, so that pivot to we're human beings then led to, how do we pay ourselves first from our business rather than last? And we learned all about the profit first concept developed by Mike Michalowicz. And we didn't really know what we were doing, but we did that. So that was huge. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like totally, my editor is going to be like, Julie, stop interrupting. I hear you, Natalie. I hear you. But I'm like, oh my gosh, most people don't know that concept. I've heard of this concept, but not put with that type of label, right? So can you tell people what that means, profits first in that?
For sure. So my story, I heard this guy named Mike Michalowicz on a podcast talk about profit first, and very like simple. I thought, I got it. I can do this. When you're looking at how you pay your bills in your business, you pay yourself at the first of the month, right? And then you figure out how to run everything else off of whatever's left. And you get that regular, steady paycheck, you can count on. And then if you've got to cut staff, you've got to change your inventory, right? Like whatever you got to do, you got to do. And so we just started with that knowledge. I'd listened to that one podcast episode. I was like, okay, we're doing this. And then it was a couple years later where I was like, I really should look into this profit first thing a little bit more. And my husband also heard Mike on a podcast and heard you could get the profit first book for free. So he got it for free, wrapped it up, put it under the Christmas tree. And before New Year's, I had devoured it. We were full throttle on the full profit first system. I'd always done my own bookkeeping, so it's pretty easy for me to like get going with that. And it's dramatically revolutionized our business. Not just putting ourselves first, which I think is really important. And you could figure that out on your own, but also the whole system that's included there. You pay yourself first, you take your profit first, you have a steady salary. You also set aside money for taxes, and here's the percentage that you should set aside for it. And then the rest can be operating expenses. And then how you think through that. He's got so many great stories in that book. But the whole system, the biggest thing is that now there's a lot less fights between me and my business partner and life partner about what can we afford to do with our business? What's the next thing that we should do for growing? How do we get the money to do that? How much should we pay ourselves? Like all those questions, we're just following the system. We have to do what Mike says, right? And there's been so many rewards for doing that, especially like, I feel really good about taking a profit distribution because I know that I earned that and there's so much I can do with it. And that would be really great for me, for my family, for my community, for the nonprofits I love, and that it doesn't have to all go back into my business.
And boy, you just hit it on the head. So many people simply put everything back into their business, investors included, oh, I just got this distribution. Oh, they just, look at me, I'm stumbling over my words. There's so many different facets as to where you might get, an influx of funds. And it's just instantly like, oh, I got to put it back into another investment. It's like, maybe you could do something else with it. Also, there are other options.
Or do a portion back to your investment, but a portion, go do something fun. Get some of the fruits of your labor that you've done.
Yeah, that definitely is wind in the sails. So this is awesome because you and your husband are entrepreneurs together and you're going through this. And that is such a challenge. And like you said, you guys went through that time where it could have just completely destroyed your lives. You surrounded yourself. And this is what another point I was wanting to touch on was your community, your tribe, the people you had around you. So tell us about the power of tribe and influence.
Yeah, we would never have done anything. We wouldn't have gotten started. We would have, stopped. We would have been bankrupt if it hadn't have been for other people. I have this like fun saying, if you ever see a turtle on a post, she had some help, right? A turtle can't get up on a post itself. Not that no one out there should go try this and put a turtle on a post. But if you think about like individuals, we love to celebrate the individual in entrepreneurship, right? The Mark Zuckerbergs and, like the people that we put up on that post, but none of them did it themselves. Even in the basic sense, you need customers, right? Or you need brokers to help you find, real estate. You can't do it alone. You need lenders, right? Like all those things. And to build those relationships, like really no matter what business we're in the relationship business. And if we're not building relationships and fostering them, it's going to be a lot harder. Not that every relationship is there just to help us succeed, but that we're there to help them succeed. And sometimes it helps us too, right? Or they know someone that can help us too. And to just operate in that mentality has just been it's made everything so much funner, honestly.
Yeah, it's powerful when you think about, you don't know when the connection is going to be made. So for example, you and I, we met today, we're having this discussion, and you'll be in my mind. It's like the mental rolodex in a sense. And at some point I end up having, oh, I got to connect Amanda with this person. You just never know when all those connections, when you put people forward, right? People first and relationships first. Yeah, sometimes it comes back to you, and it's a really great thing. You and I were introduced by a mutual friend, and so that was such a great thing for me. Like, yay, and a great thing for the audience. It just circles back, that give and take in life. That's so great. So you are doing something that I am absolutely in love with, that I participate in already. And so my audience has heard about this, but it's a concept that is so it's a mental hurdle for many people, because it's not a new concept, but it's really starting to get traction. And so I want to talk about this. It's not a real estate investment strategy specifically. Definitely use it for real estate investing. A lot of people do, but I want to give you the freedom to go ahead and tell us a little bit more about where all this led you, like what you are doing now and how that serves people.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. So, we were a couple years into our business. We had just come out of that really trying experience, and divine intervention, if you want to call it that, kicked in.
Yeah, definitely.
And we met this really awesome guy named Mark, who's been a former guest on your podcast. And he's the one that introduced us. And he introduced us to this concept called Bank on Yourself. And it was actually through a documentary that we watched. And I was like, because we were like hosting documentary screenings at our coffee shop, and Mark volunteered to like pick the documentary. And at the end of it, we had known him for a little while. At the end of it, I was so mad at him that he had never told us before what this documentary shared, because this way of looking at finances and having control over your money just spoke to me. And I was like, I can't believe like you didn't like shove this down my throat before, because this seems like really amazing. But I was still a little skeptical, right? Because it like seemed too good to be true, that you could have your money like growing for you in, of all things, a life insurance policy, and you could still use it to like grow your business, pay for your kids' college, invest in real estate, like whatever it is at the same time. And it could still be there for like retirement income, and like I was like so overwhelmed, and like this just sounds way too good to be true. But I was like, it's at least worth looking into. And so we dove in, we did the research, we read books, we talked to Mark, we got, our unique financial strategy for ourselves. And it just made a lot of sense. And so we're like, we'll try it. Worst thing could happen is we have to wait a few years. We'll just get all our money back and, call it a day. And then 2.5 years later, we paid off all our student loans. The biggest thing though was that we were still like figuring out, how do we make money from this business, right? It forced us to not just pay ourselves first, but also set aside funds for our dreams, our goals, the things we wanted to see happen first, right? The first of the month, every month for the past 7.5 years, I've had a little chunk of money leave my bank account and go to this whole life policy where it's growing for me. And then I've used it to pay off my student loans, to get through a flood we had in our business, to take a trip to Ireland, right? Like lots of different, more like dream or like emergency fund in the case of the
flood.
The flood, yeah. A down payment on our first property that we own came from that account. And it's totally transformed our life, helping us have that discipline, right? To be consistent with our money. And then also allowed us to do things that if we hadn't have had that discipline, we never would have done. And know that we're not sacrificing anything. It's still growing for us. It's still our quote unquote retirement funds, whatever that means. Right. And when we were selling the former business and I was in my second trimester with our first kid and everything, we were thinking, what do we do now? How do we change the world, make it better, like we did with the coffee shop, but not as a coffee shop. We don't want to do that again, right? Raise our kid behind the bar making lattes. No, that's not going to work. And we thought, like, what's made the biggest difference for us? And it's been that relationship with Mark, and then this financial way of thinking called Bank on Yourself that had made the biggest difference for us. So like, we got to do this. And at first, when my husband applied with Mark, because I was like, you go do this, I'll just focus on raising our kid. At first, Mark was like, nope, you're too entrepreneurial. When you work in the financial sector, there's a box. You got to stay in the box. You got to be compliant, right?
Yeah.
And then he came back to us and said, actually, Amanda's a little more compliant. She can follow the rules, right? Like, so you could do this if you do it together, but we also want you to do it as your own brand, not under us. Totally understand, Mark's protecting himself from our crazy entrepreneurial ideas. But it also gives us the freedom to express those entrepreneurial ideas too. And like figure out our niche. Who are we going to serve with this concept? How do we promote it in our unique way with our unique voice and help the most people that we can? That was a really long-winded story to answer your question.
No, it is. No, it's fantastic. I was riveted. I'm just like, oh, tell me more. Tell me more. So I just have to go back and ask this question though, and that is, do you think you could have received what Mark had to offer before having the coffee shop? Like, I'm this huge believer in and growing more and more into this concept of everything happens in its right time. If you're seeking after something, it will come to you at the right time and not a moment before. And once I accept that, it's a game changer, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm wondering, could you have received that before the coffee shop, or did you have to go through the coffee shop struggles to get there?
Yeah, I think there's another key part of my story in that I was 24 when 2008, the Great Recession happened. That was a huge part of my story. And that was about the time when the nonprofit I was working for, I qualified for the 403B match, right? And I could start investing in my qualified retirement account and get a match from my employer. But I was also looking at my older employers, one of my bosses in particular, and hearing jokes about how his 401k had just become a 201k, right? And all of that.
Right. Yeah.
And I was already a little like anti-big business, anti-big banks, a little bit too, kind of the Occupy movement.
Yeah, you're like nonprofit and you're starting a coffee shop with documentary screening. Like, yeah, this fits.
Yeah. So I think that that moment was really what primed me to be open to entrepreneurship, open to alternatives outside of big banks and the stock market. And that, like, being in that stage of life at that time has, I think, totally shaped my story.
That's really exciting. So some people may or may not have listened to the episode with Mark. It's an episode with Mark Willis, and man, that was like a year ago already. I can't believe it. But so if they haven't listened to that, they don't know Bank on Yourself. They don't know necessarily infinite banking. So let's go ahead and unpack that, because I'm a sold out person on this. I've used, one of my insurance policies. I've leveraged that for different things. It's powerful because your money is constantly working for you, and nobody believes it when you tell it. So I'm going to let you explain it so I don't like muddle it up.
Yeah. So most people, when they hear whole life insurance, they are hear kind of the words of some big financial gurus out there that say the costs are too high. You buy term, invest the rest. That's way better. All those kind of things. And I totally actually agree with them that most whole life insurance is exactly what they say. The key point about the Bank on Yourself concept, or what people call infinite banking as well, is that we do it differently. than the typical whole life. The way that we structure the policy, how it works to get you high early cash value. Typical whole life, you'd had zero cash value. You got to wait a long time to see it grow. We have high cash value at the beginning. And then also typical whole life, your death benefit stays the same for your entire life. How ours works, it grows. It's just a different structure, a different way of doing things. And then also the companies that we partner with have particular ways of doing business that make it work too. There's only a select handful of companies that meet all our criteria as well. So this is part of why you have to work with someone who knows all of these, how to structure things, what companies to work with. And we even match people with different companies depending on what they're looking for. We don't even work with the same company all the time. So the whole like bank on yourself brand, right? Like that is like having a certain USDA certified organic brand in terms of if you're looking for how to do whole life insurance a particular way, it's going to have all that's, if you're working with a bank on yourself professional, it's going to have all of those checks and balances and, things that make it for sure the right thing, right? Whereas any whole life insurance agent out there could sell you whole life insurance, but it might not have exactly the different things that you need to make it a bank on yourself designed policy.
Wait, let's go into that a little bit if you don't mind. Like,
Yeah.
So if I went to somebody, a provider, I'll sell you this whole life insurance policy. Could they potentially, excuse me, be selling from the same insurance broker carrier? I'm not sure the correct term, but could they potentially be selling the exact same one, but it's just structured differently?
Yeah,
like what's the structure behind the scenes, I guess?
Yeah. And so one of the particular things is that the structure can be different depending on your age, how much premium you're putting in, like how much you're contributing to the policy each year, things like that. So we go through extensive training to learn all the different strategies, right? All the different ways to structure things. And there's no like cookie cutter approach. Every single policy is different. And we've even had clients that have said, I really want this. And so we've tweaked the cookie cutter, like how we would typically do it to fit them. But there's also one of the big parts of the policy, to use a technical term, is called a paid up additions rider, which is what's added onto the policy to help get you that high early cash value. And some companies limit how much you can put there. Some companies have different what's called load costs and how much it costs to add money to that rider. There's a lot of different things. So that's part of why we need to know like what companies have the lowest load cost, allow you to put the most into that part of the policy in particular, things like that. So it's not something you can just learn off of Google. And honestly, I worked with, so one of the companies we work with, I talked with some captive agents that work only for that company, and they had no clue how to structure it like we structure it. And I jumped on Zoom and I showed them how to, but I was like, but I can't really show you in just an hour. You would need lots of training, but at least this could open your eyes, like help you see that, yeah, we do things differently. You're not going to pretend to do this for your clients too. And that was really eye-opening for me that they had never been taught what I've been taught, right? Because I don't know, their company didn't teach them. I'm not sure why.
I don't know that it would be advantageous for their company to teach that necessarily. Potentially if somebody were to borrow that money and then they don't have control. There are we could go down that rabbit hole. That'd be fine. but really the concept is I have a whole life insurance policy that I'm feeding instead of a 401k. I'm putting into this whole life insurance policy. And at some point I can draw and I can pull money out of this whole life policy. And I can use that money for whatever I want to use it for. That trip to Ireland, that, flood in the basement, I can borrow against myself. But while I have that money taken out and I'm borrowing, I'm not losing money. They still see it as I have the whole amount still in there. So my money is now working I just think we can get our money, the same dollar, to work so many different ways
Yeah.
when we use this type of strategy.
Yeah.
So I'll let you elaborate more.
Yeah, the biggest thing for real estate investors that I love and why I want to be a real estate investor is that when you're purchasing real estate, you're creating an asset, right? That could be in your family for generations, or that you could sell one day, and go do a 1031 exchange to another asset, or pay for your kids' college, or whatever you're going to do. What if you could create two assets at once? You're creating the asset of the whole life insurance cash value that's growing for you, and you're leveraging that to go also do real estate and to build that real estate asset. And I don't know that people pretend, right? Like you could have a brokerage account and then you could use that brokerage account to get a loan, right? Use your stocks as collateral to get that loan. I don't know that I'd ever do that, because what if those stocks balance go down and then they could like say, we can't give you this loan anymore, or what if I can't pay back the loan? I'm not going to sell my stocks if they're down at the same time, right, to pay back that loan. Whereas with the whole life, you're banking on yourself, right? You get to control your loan repayments and things like that too. Because we work with mutual companies, you're an owner of the company. You get to call the shots, just like you call the shots in your real estate company, right? So
Yeah.
you get to say whether you're going to repay your loan or not, and how much, and change it any time, which the whole idea of control, right? I'm a little bit of a control freak, as you might imagine, as an entrepreneur. Like that's one of the most appealing parts of it to me.
I love that element of control also. And it's a foreign concept because we've been primed to think that we simply need to always be paying an interest if it's on a car loan, if it's on well, nobody does that anymore. If you have a whole life insurance policy, you pay cash, but you just get accustomed to, okay, if I do this, the interest rate is going to be XYZ on my mortgage, on whatever it is. And when you're borrowing against yourself in these policies, you get to call the shots. Maybe I don't want to pay this back. Maybe I'm just going to wait until I die and pay it back from the death benefit. I mean, you can really decide how you're going to go about things.
Yeah. Yeah. Or if you're buying a property to like flip it, or it takes a little bit of time to get renters in there. Maybe you're doing, a renovation project. You don't have to worry about having to make loan repayments in the meantime.
Yeah. It's amazing. Amanda, this is such a cool concept. I've been in love with this concept for a couple of years now. I've read some books on it. I don't know enough. I know enough to make me lethal. That's what I always say. Yep, that's perfect. Why I like people like you and Mark and some other associates. So is there anything else that you think would be really helpful for people to understand?
The thing that I've been like digging into more and more is how that profit first concept that we talked about before and bank on yourself can work together. So about a year ago, I became a profit first professional. I paid a bunch of money to learn even more about profit first and become part of that tribe, and connect with other coaches and bookkeepers and accountants that all help people implement profit first. And it's actually kind of fun how like you can think about the 15% that you set aside to pay taxes from, the revenue of a business, how that could go into a policy, a bank on yourself designed whole life policy, and then you could pay your taxes from there. And so then you're still paying the Internal Revenue Service just like you normally would, but that money's still growing for you for the rest of your life. And there's so much fun we can have in taking multiple different really good ideas and combining them together. And I'm like digging more and more into that, playing around with it myself, in terms of how much money can I really get into a policy before, right? I have to actually like spend it. And it just becomes a little bit of like a gamification that continues to motivate me to make money and help people, and thereby I make more money because I'm helping more people. But then also like, well, then we're going to do this construction project. How do we like do it, but also have it growing in our policy? And so then we're, improving the value of our property, and, the money is growing in our policy at the same time. And it's just a really fun way to approach money, that, as much as we don't want to think about money sometimes, for me, like I was kind of in that place before too. Like you just don't talk about money, or it's hard to think about. I don't want to look like I'm too rich, or whatever is kind of my mentality. But to like think of it in terms of helping people, gamifying so that I can help more people, right? That's probably um like an untold part of using Bank on Yourself that a lot of people don't realize or like think about it at first.
Definitely. Definitely. Oh, there's so much more. So I have to unfortunately wrap up our episode, which is just absolutely wild to me how fast time goes. But Amanda has amazing resources available for you. I mean, she's a fellow podcaster. So I'm going to let you, if you could tell people, where can they listen to you and where can they go and visit and get all sorts of awesome goodies?
Yeah. So look for Grandma's Wealth Wisdom on your podcast app that you're listening to, or we're also on YouTube. On YouTube, we do have a fun Bank on Yourself FAQ playlist. If you're like, I got to learn more about what Bank on Yourself is and how it works, and why aren't the fees so high, and how do policy loans really work, and stuff like that. So we talk about all of those. And if you're like, I just want to go to a website, see things there, it's grandmaswealthwisdom.com.
That is absolutely fantastic. Amanda, I am so grateful to have you on Ask Me How I Know. And I look forward to staying connected with you.
Me too. Thank you so much.
Awesome. To everyone out there listening, thank you so much for listening, and go and find your freedom. Thanks so much for joining me for another episode of Ask Me How I Know. This episode was brought to you by 3 Keys Investments. They are dedicated to helping people like you, you, my awesome listeners, develop passive income and legacy wealth through multifamily investing. Feel free to check out their website, 3keysinvestments.com, to see if there is an offering that will help your portfolio grow and meet all of your needs. If you haven't already rated, reviewed, subscribed, liked, all of those bells and whistles, I would be absolutely honored if you would do that for Ask Me How I Know. Thanks again, and go make it a great day.